Automate or not to automate? I'm Jim Barnes, CEO of Invista, looking forward to spending a great powerhouse 20 minutes with you talking about should you automate or not to automate, and some of the decisions, quite frankly, that you should be making or not making as you think through your DC and how do you optimize your operations. So we're going to talk about just a few things here, right? When and where to automate, it should be implemented, excuse me. How do we develop the economic payback analysis and really what drives that economic analysis to justify automation? And how to determine and implement the optimal mix of automation and labor productivity solutions? And then last, the steps to optimally assess, justify, and implement any automation solutions and some key takeaways. So the reality is this: COVID-19 has forced many consumers to become channel agnostic, and we're now living in this, quite frankly, this digitized, connected omni-channel world. Now, you may say, well, why does that have an impact on me and my DC optimization and how I think about optimizing my distribution centers? I would say it goes beyond just optimizing your distribution centers. I would also share that it, quite frankly, goes to how do you optimize your network to fulfill demand from any place, anywhere, which may actually include things like micro fulfillment centers and dark stores as well. So the reality is that many consumers today really expect omni-channel services, and your DC is just one of many ways to fulfill that demand, to meet that consumer demand in terms of how we're moving forward in this world of omni-channel. Here's the reality. The reality that we're living in right now is that e-commerce from Q4 of 2020 compared to 2019 is up by 32.1%. For every $1 that's spent today in online, spent in retail, $1 is spent with respect to that $5 of retail purchasing. So really 20%. So e-commerce isn't going away. Matter of fact, as we all know, the pandemic has actually pulled it forward. The question is, will it actually stay? We believe the answer is yes, not only for retailers, but also for brands. It's having a major impact, not only, again, for retailers who are already in the direct-to-consumer business, but also it's having an impact for brands as well that are trying to understand how to actually fulfill wholesale, retail, and direct-to-consumer demand, depending upon if it's a drop ship or non-drop ship environment. The second reality that we're in is really this conversation of labor shortages. So coming out of the financial crisis, in 2009 until really an all-time low of really March of 2020, where unemployment was as high as 10%, and now it was as low as 3.5%. And obviously with the pandemic, that actually spiked up to as much as 15.5%. We've now dropped down to labor shortages or overall unemployment, again, for civilian unemployment rates of 6%. Now, I would tell you that the 3.5% pre-COVID, probably those unemployed were probably unemployable. And the 6%, although not as healthy as we would like it to be, quite frankly, we still have a significant labor shortage when it comes to distribution centers, and therefore putting pressure on organizations to perform. One, because of labor shortages, and two, because of actually wage increases. So wages are definitely going to increase, obviously, with the new stimulus package. The federal government's trying to actually imply by 2025, wage rates, a minimum wage will be at 15. Now, the positive thing is, in terms of distribution centers, most organizations, and you can see it, this is information from Glassdoor, are already above that $15 minimum wage rate. So although important and something to note, for most distribution centers, $15 and above, quite frankly, is required to be competing against other types of retailers and distributors today in North America. So what's happening? Look, the reality is that we're transforming and must transform into digital transformation. So vital to every industry and market today. And again, we're talking about as it relates to DCs and distribution centers, but there's an aspect of IoT, AI, machine learning, where we'll talk about today about automation or robotics that are leveraging AI, machine learning, elastic cloud computing, which is quite frankly to be able to understand how to search data, how to actually expand dynamically infrastructure as we move from really this on-premise environment to a virtual cloud or SaaS-based environment that is really truly native to taking advantage of cloud computing. And you're seeing a lot of warehouse management systems, a lot of warehouse execution systems move from on-prem to, quite frankly, in the cloud today. The last is around big data and data science. So now taking the data that I actually glean from my operation, glean from my overall network, and using that to actually turn that into information that can actually be used to make good decisions. The other thing too that's vital to anybody who's either in the physical distribution space of either a retailer who's a retail supply network or a distribution supply chain network is that there's some truisms, right? I have to have a global supply chain network strategy. I have to have physical distribution. I have to have transportation, and I have to have inventory and inventory position in order to meet that demand. So again, these are truisms regardless if you're retail or distribution centric. And we'll start getting into the conversation regarding automation here now. But so what are we solving for, right? If we're looking what we're solving for in a DC, it's really around these three major factors. I've got labor shortages, or in the case, wage increases, but primarily labor shortages where I just can't find labor today to operate. I've got cost of space. Again, as real estate, especially distribution center real estate starts to increase, I want to maximize my cost of space to make sure that every cube, every amount of cube in the building is actually maximized. And then I've got obviously my cost of labor, as we talked about as well. So again, these three factors are what we're really trying to solve for. What does the market think in terms of automation? Well, the reality is that, you know, we're seeing, and this is a little bit old in 2018 data, but the reality is that we're going to start to see a lot more automation, a lot more robotics being used today in distribution center operations and manufacturing centric operations as well, to do a couple things: standardize processes, right? Repeat those processes on a consistent basis from a quality perspective. But the real focus is to take those standardized processes that are in today and really drive labor out of the actual DC operations. So a little bit more facts. Again, this comes back from 2017 MHI and report, but it still falls, and it's still relevant today. Is that if you look at 61% look at robotics and automation as a competitive advantage, right? Again, 27% support the ongoing improvement, and then little to no impact. But the reality is, you can see where robots and automation, and this study was done, quite frankly, over 4 years ago. We are actually starting to see this accelerate even more today because of the pandemic. Again, disruptive market technologies, robotics and automation are key. What's a robot? So let's talk about robots and talk about automation, and really in the same like terms. So, you know, a robot is simply a machine designed to execute one or more tasks automatically with speed and precision. I think that's the key. It's speed and precision. It's the consistency of performing a standardized operation, and I emphasize the word standardized operation, on a repetitive basis that, quite frankly, can work 24/7. So once put in place, right, instead of putting in a 3-shift operation, which requires 3 people, I literally could have one robot working 24/7 as a relative comparison. So let's talk about some different types of automation storage that we typically have seen today, right? That we're accustomed to. So the first is, we've all seen automation storage and retrieval systems, or better known as ASRS systems. These are primarily used a lot with pallet, but in this case here, this is a good example of where I'm actually using totes as an ASRS type system for smaller items. We've seen automated automated guided vehicles, AGVs. These are not new. Quite frankly, these have been used a lot today, and quite frankly, this is 20-plus-year-old technology. We're starting to see industrial robots and palletizing in assembly areas. So these are just typical ways we've seen. This happens to be a FANUC robot today, picking up cases and palletizing cases today. So this is what we're really used to seeing. As we move into additional areas of robots and automation, we really break them down into really 4 types of groups. Good to person, which is robots travel, right? Persons to good, which are really workers and robots travel as well. Goods to robot, and robots to good. We'll kind of go through a couple examples of these. So good to person. So again, we're talking about where I'm actually have product in a shuttle system, and I'm bringing that product to the associate where he or she can take the product from the shuttle and then place it into a tote that's an outbound tote. Sometimes we call this a good to person, obviously in this example, but again, what I'm doing is I'm eliminating any walking time by bringing the product to me, therefore the name good to person. Person to goods. So here's a couple examples. You got people out there like Locust on the right-hand side. You've got Six Rivers on the left-hand side, where basically I've got robots, and we would call these collaborative robots, where they're collaborating along with the associate. So the collaboration meaning that the associate and the actual robot are working together, and it's in a safe environment. So again, the left-hand side was Six Rivers, where basically the cart or the robot is actually driving through a serpentine type strategy, and the associate is literally scanning, is being told what to scan or what to pick up and to place into a tote. And again, it's kind of like, quite frankly, it's like the dog pulling the actual owner. The actual, in this case, the cart being the dog, was actually pulling you along and setting the pace. You've got on the right-hand side, you've got Locust, which is a slightly different type of strategy, where in this case, the robot is actually in a zone, and now the associate is actually following the robot based upon the zone. So the actual robot shows up actually at the pick location, and the actual associate is actually picking the actual product into the actual tote or carton as the actual robots move from pick to pick. So it's a little bit slightly different strategy, but again, we're all talking about collaborative type robots. And so if we look at what a collaborative robot is, it's really a robot intended to physically interact with humans in a shared workspace, as I alluded to before. So again, it's man and machine working together in a common space. Robots to good. So here's a good example where the robot itself is actually going to the actual good, in this case, picking a pair of shoes. So we're starting to see now robots working not only not working collaboratively, but working autonomously within respect to different types of environments. Good to robot. This is a good example of Kindred. So Kindred AI out of Toronto and San Francisco is taking product off of a unit sorter, dumping it into really a bin. There's a 6-axis robot that's inside the actual bin, taking the product, picking it up using visual recognition, and then placing it into an outbound bin and sorting it to an outbound bin by which, quite frankly, the associate would pick up the actual completed order. So this is a good to robots that's being used today. These systems, I believe, are being used at the Gap as an example, as a big user of Kindred AI. Great solution to minimize the amount of labor doing that pack out and that sorting in the back end. Why? Increasing capacity, not only increasing capacity, but also having an impact on labor. So let's go through an example of a high automation case study. So this happens to be a multi-channel apparel footwear company today, right? Current operational state, you're looking at a tilt tray sorter, actually not one side, but we call an AB side tilt tray sorter. Looking at multiple types of picking, residual, less than full case picking. You're looking at some of the challenges they have today, where they're using waves versus using dynamic waves. I've got a pack out type operation, the back of the unit sorter. And what's happened here is that as their business has changed, being more direct to consumer, the old layout, quite frankly, isn't fitting the bill in terms of the way their order profiles are changing. And so therefore the need to look at, if we automate, how do we automate a facility today that's over 750,000 square feet to really meet the demands of that order profile? So here's the current state. We've got obviously single deep selective racking on the left side. We've got a bunch of single delete racking on the right-hand side. We've got infamous pick modules in the middle, kind of in the center of the building. You can see the tilt tray sorter there with an AB side tilt tray sorter. And then there's a shipping sorter to actually handle pack out, right? So a very wholesale driven type layout. As again, I alluded to, they're moving to more direct to consumer, as not only their retailers are changing their demand profiles, they're seeing a big uptick in direct to consumer, both through direct and indirect channels. So what we've come up with is, quite frankly, a different way to look at this. So this happens to be a new building, highly automated, and I will also allude to the fact that the previous building requires about 850 people in the operation. So you can kind of see where I'm going. 850 people in the operation day in a semi-annual environment to really manage it. So what we've come up with is really a couple different automated solutions. On the left-hand side, still using VNA, very narrow act, to actually manage full case and full case put away in a dynamic put away. We're introducing a couple different concepts here. One is what we call a pocket sorter, and one is a shuttle system to actually manage both the wholesale side and the retail side. And so if you think about what does this look like, right? So if you're not familiar with what we call a pocket sorter, its ability to actually put units coming from a case flow replenishment system into a pocket sorter to actually do the sortation, and then a pack out coming off the back of the actual the pocket sorter. And again, using a shuttle system or good to person station as well is part of this to actually handle the buffer between the actual unit sorter, the pocket unit sorter, and the actual full case replenishment, and also residuals coming back into this buffer system using, again, a shuttle system to make that happen. Back end pretty much doesn't really change in terms of existing shipping sorter and shipping downline sorters, as you will imagine. The other introduction is because of the fact they do a lot of singles, is to really use a simple flat pattern, what we really call a flat product type sortation system, using belts and rollers to actually handle stuff that weighs less than 1 pound as well. So again, two combinations of sorters that we've introduced to the process. But if you look at the automation justification, you can imagine where this is coming from. Our ability, yes, the higher automation is a price tag of $47 million, but it has a net labor savings of $235 million over a 10-year time period. The return on investment on this is actually less than 27 months, which is relatively quick. And the reason being is that we're going from well over 800 employees to 415 FTEs in total. So again, the need to reduce labor by half actually justifies the investment of this particular facility, and more importantly, has enough flexibility, enough agility to actually meet the different types of demand patterns they have today. Today, they can't react to different types of demand patterns and order profiles because they're kind of stuck in the existing automation they have today. Now, you do see the fact that we're actually introducing a warehouse execution system. Not to mention the warehouse control system, but the WES today, which is really important, is going to be managing the automation and to balancing automation between each of those subsystems. So it knows really what's happening. So we move away from this concept of waving to a waveless environment by letting the WES manage how it optimizes using AI and machine learning to evaluate where and when should I actually be fulfilling from what particular subsystem, but more importantly, making sure the subsystems themselves are working synchronously together. So what's holding us back? What's holding us back is, quite frankly, a few things. One of them is really around flexibility. When we start to automate, we start to lose flexibility, which is a fact. And so therefore, you need to make sure that you drive the right flexibility in your design. There's nothing to say that there's still a need, and the Japanese have proved this, there's still a need for manual labor in processes that are non-standardized. We only really want to standardize and automate processes, where they become standardized. The cost and payback can obviously be an issue. Safety with collaborative robots is always a concern, and other types of automation. And then really the key is long-term maintenance. As you move to more automation, your maintenance costs, right or wrong, is going to increase. And the type of talent and the skill set that you have to manage that equipment also needs to be evaluated. So a few key takeaways: run the math, right? Automation is not for everyone, but if designed correctly with the appropriate flexibility, then it can be a game changer. Pick the right partner who understands how to integrate all aspects on the four walls, just not the automation. It starts with the data. It's an end-to-end process design, enabling technology and the right talent and experience to actually help you or actually help yourself when it comes to these types of automation projects. It does require a different level of associate. So moving from pushing boxes as to why am I pushing boxes and how does this actually affect the system? So again, the level of talent to operate these automated facilities does require a different type of person. This is somebody again who is just in the operation doing what's being told versus versus let me understand why I'm doing this function. And let's not forget about maintenance. Again, I think where most clients and most customers go wrong is they don't understand the amount of maintenance required and the type of skill sets. So you've got a couple choices. You're either going to build, buy, or lease. So you're either going to build the talent internally to maintain the system. You're going to go buy it from somebody else or lease it. But the reality is, don't forget about the importance of maintenance and how you support these systems long term. So with that said, if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Jim Barnes, again, CEO of Envista. I can be reached at jbarnes@envistacorp.com. And if you want to learn more about Envista, feel free to go out to envistacorp.com as well. Thank you. We'll now open up to Q&A. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer them. Thank you.